Freeloader. My father laughed as he threw the $800 dinner bill in my face. He thought I was broke. He did not know I had just bought his company. The next morning, his CEO bowed to me. "Good morning, ma'am." My father's smile vanished. They never saw it coming. "My name is Zora, and I am 35 years old. For the last 10 years, my family has treated me like a stain on their perfect reputation. To them, I am the failure who drives a rusted Toyota and wears plain clothes. They have no idea that my plain black t-shirt cost $500, or that my investment firm Phoenix Capital just acquired a 51% controlling stake in the logistics empire my father works for. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. My father Otis had dragged us all to the Capitol Grill, one of the most expensive steakhouses in downtown Atlanta. He was convinced that tomorrow morning, his CEO, Mr. Sterling, was going to announce his promotion to vice president. He sat at the head of the table, puffing out his chest, looking like a man who owned the world. "Order whatever you want," he had announced loudly, making sure the tables around us could hear. "The company card is treating us tonight, or at least it will be once I get that title tomorrow." I sat at the far end of the booth sipping my tap water. Next to me, my younger sister Ebony was busy taking selfies with a lobster tail she had not touched yet. She adjusted her hair extensions and angled her face to show off the logo on her handbag. It was a Birkin bag, or at least a very good replica she had bought from a trunk in a parking lot. "You are not eating, Zora, my mother?" Bernice asked. Her voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "Or, are you waiting for us to offer you leftovers like usual?" "I am not hungry," I said, keeping my voice calm. I had actually eaten a light dinner at my penthouse before coming here, but they did not know about the penthouse. They thought I was staying in their guest room because I had been evicted. In reality, I was only staying there for a week because my contractor was installing imported Italian marble in my master bathroom, and the dust was unbearable. Brad, my brother-in-law, laughed. He was the only white person at the table, and he wore that fact like a badge of honor. He swirled his glass of Cabernet, a bottle that cost $300, and looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and disgust. "Come on, Bernice, let her be," Brad said, leaning back and manspreading so wide his knee pressed against my leg. "Not everyone has a palate for fine dining. Zora is probably used to ramen noodles and drive-through menus. It must be intimidating for her to be in a place where the waiters wear tuxedos." I moved my leg away from his. "Actually, Brad, I just prefer to keep my mind clear. Unlike some people who need liquid courage to face a Monday morning." Brad's face turned a shade of pink, but he covered it with a smirk. He was a stockbroker, or at least that is what he told people. My background check on him revealed he was actually a junior associate who had not made a significant trade in 6 months. He was living off my sister's credit cards while pretending to be a Wolf of Wall Street. Ebony put her phone down and rolled her eyes. "Do not be rude, Zora. Brad is just trying to educate you. You could learn something from him. Maybe if you listen to people who actually make money, you would not be driving that embarrassingly old car. I saw you park it down the street. Did you not want the valet to see it?" "I parked it myself because I enjoy walking," I lied. "I drove the Toyota specifically to test them, to see if they would treat me with dignity, even if they thought I had nothing." The answer was becoming very clear. My father Otis tapped his fork against his wine glass, demanding attention. He loved the sound of his own voice. "Let us focus on the important matter at hand," he boomed. "Tomorrow is a big day. Mr. Sterling personally requested my presence at the town hall meeting. You know what that means. VP of Logistics. Finally, the respect I deserve. Finally, a salary that matches my genius." We all raised our glasses. Even I raised my water glass. Despite everything, I wanted him to be happy. To Otis, my mother beamed, clutching his arm. "The man who carries this family on his back, unlike some others who just add dead weight." She shot a glance at me. The waiter arrived with the check a few minutes later. It came in a black leather folder. He placed it respectfully in front of my father. My father opened it. I saw his eyes widen slightly. $840. He stared at the number for a long moment. Then a cruel idea seemed to form in his mind. A slow smile spread across his face. He closed the folder and slid it across the table. It stopped right in front of me. "What is this?" I asked, looking at the black leather booklet. My father leaned back, crossing his arms. "You can get this one, Zora." The table went silent. Ebony covered her mouth to hide a giggle. Brad looked amused. My mother nodded in agreement. I opened the folder. The total stared back at me. $840. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You invited us. You said this was a celebration. And you know I am currently between situations." My father's face hardened. Between situations. Is that what we are calling it now? You are 35 years old, Zora. You are living in my guest room. You are using my electricity. You are eating my food. You shower for 20 minutes every morning using my hot water. He stood up slightly, his voice rising. Other diners turned to look. "I did the math, Zora," he continued. "The water bill, the electric bill, the grocery bill. Since you moved back in last week, you have cost me easily $200 in resources plus rent. In this economy, rent is not cheap. So consider this bill your rent payment. Pay it." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was not shame, it was fury. I had given my mother $5,000 in cash the day I arrived. I told her to use it for groceries and bills. I explicitly told her to keep it between us because I did not want to hurt Dad's pride. I looked at my mother. She looked away, sipping her wine, pretending to examine the label. She had pocketed the money. Of course she had. She probably spent it on the new dress she was wearing. "Mom," I said, "are you not going to say anything?" She shrugged. "Your father is right, Zora. You cannot expect to ride for free forever. Brad and Ebony pay their own mortgage. They are building a life. You are just floating. It is time you contributed." "Contributing is one thing," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Humiliating me in public is another. I do not have $800 on my card right now." This was technically true. I carried an American Express Centurion card, the black card, but I rarely used it in front of them to maintain my cover. Brad laughed loudly, a bark of a sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, this is rich. She does not have the funds. Otis, I told you, she is probably maxed out on credit cards just trying to keep gas in that Toyota." Ebony leaned in, her fake eyelashes fluttering. "Do not worry, Zora. Maybe you can apply for a job here. I hear they are looking for dishwashers. That way you can pay Dad back in installments." My father snatched the bill back, but he did not pay it yet. He wanted to twist the knife. "Freeloader," he spat the word out. It hung in the air, heavy and ugly. "That is what you are, Zora. A freeloader." I worked my way up from the warehouse floor. "I built this family. And look at you. No husband, no career, no assets, just a middle-aged woman sleeping in her parents' house. You are a disappointment." He looked at Brad. "Brad, son, take care of this, will you? I will Venmo you later. I just want to show the staff that at least one man at this table has real money." Brad smirked and pulled out a platinum card. It was a flashy move, but I knew his credit limit was likely hitting the ceiling. "Put it away, Brad." My voice cut through the noise. It was not loud, but it had the tone I used in boardrooms when I was about to hostilely take over a company. It was the tone that made grown men in suits sweat. Everyone looked at me. I reached into my purse. It was a simple canvas tote bag, nothing like Ebony's flashy fake designer gear. But inside I carried the power to buy and sell everyone at this table 10 times over. I pulled out a stack of cash. I always carried emergency funds. It was a habit from the days when I actually was poor, when I promised myself I would never be vulnerable again. I counted out 9 crisp $100 bills. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You called me a freeloader," I said, looking directly into my father's eyes. "You listed the cost of the water I used. You counted the minutes of my showers. You let your wife pocket the $5,000 I gave her on Monday, and you still demanded I pay for your lobster and your ego." My mother gasped. "You gave me no money, you liar." I ignored her. I looked at Brad, who was still holding his card in midair, looking confused. "And you? You think you are the definition of success because you lease a BMW and wear a suit you bought on sale. You laugh at my car, you laugh at my clothes, but you are drowning in debt, Brad. I know about the second mortgage on your house. I know about the maxed out cards." Brad's face went white. "How do you know that?" I dropped the stack of bills onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to the empty wine bottle. "There is $900, I said, cold as ice. The bill is $840. Keep the change, Dad. Consider it a severance package, because you are going to need every penny when you walk into that office tomorrow morning." My father laughed a nervous, unsure sound. "What are you talking about, girl? Are you threatening me? I am the VP. Mr. Sterling loves me." "Mr. Sterling does not even know your name," I said. "But he will tomorrow." I turned to my mother. "And Mom, do not bother making up the guest room. I will be sleeping elsewhere tonight. Somewhere the water does not cost you a dime." I turned on my heel and walked out. I did not look back. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I could hear the hushed whispers of the other diners. As I stepped out into the cool Atlanta night, the valet rushed over to me confused because I had no ticket. I walked past him to my beat-up Toyota Camry parked down the block. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I did not cry. I had cried enough tears over this family to fill an ocean, and I was done. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my Chief Operating Officer, Michael. Message: "The acquisition is finalized. The press release goes out at 8:00 a.m. You have full control of the board." I typed back a single word: execute. I started the car. The engine sputtered and whined before catching. It was a terrible sound, but tonight it sounded like a war drum. My father wanted to play the big shot. He wanted to use his power to humiliate me. He wanted to talk about money and status. Fine. Tomorrow morning, I would show him what real power looked like. I would show him the difference between a middle manager with an ego and the owner of the company. I drove toward the city skyline. My penthouse was waiting. My team was waiting. And tomorrow Mr. Sterling was waiting. My family thought they had just shamed a freeloader into silence. They had no idea they had just declared war on their new boss. And unlike them, I did not fight with insults at a dinner table. I fought with signatures and pink slips. The drive to the hotel where I would stay for the night was short. I could not go back to my penthouse yet due to the construction, but I checked into the Four Seasons under my company name. As I lay in the king-sized bed staring at the ceiling, I replayed my father's voice. Freeloader. Disappointment. I closed my eyes and visualized the lobby of his office building. I visualized the security guards. I visualized the elevator ride up to the executive suite. I fell asleep with a smile on my face. It was the last peaceful night of sleep my family would have for a very long time. Because when the sun rose, my world and their world were going to collide, and only one of us was going to be left standing. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of my hotel suite, but I was already awake. I had been awake for hours pacing the plush carpet and running the numbers in my head one last time. Today was not just a Tuesday, it was Judgment Day. I showered and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was tired, yes, but she was also dangerous. My family saw a broken 35-year-old spinster. The business world saw a shark. I needed to be both today. I walked to the closet where my assistant had delivered my armor. It was a Tom Ford suit tailored to within a millimeter of my life. The fabric was a midnight blue wool that cost more than my father's entire wardrobe. I slipped into the trousers and buttoned the blazer. It felt like a second skin. I fastened my Patek Philippe watch around my wrist. It was a heavy, cold reminder of exactly who I was. But I could not let them see this Zora. Not yet. The reveal had to be perfect. It had to happen in the boardroom under the fluorescent lights where there was no hiding from the truth. I reached into my bag and pulled out my disguise. It was a beige trench coat I had bought at a thrift store 5 years ago. It was slightly stained at the hem, and missing a button on the left cuff. It was the uniform of the struggling failure they wanted me to be. I pulled it on, buttoning it all the way to my chin to hide the silk blouse underneath. I looked in the mirror one last time. The shark was gone. The freeloader was back. I checked out of the hotel and took a taxi back to my parents' house. I needed to retrieve my car and drive to the headquarters. I wanted to arrive separately to control the timing. I walked up the driveway of the suburban house that had been my prison for the last week. The morning air was humid and sticky. My Toyota Camry was parked on the street because Brad did not want it leaking oil on the driveway next to his leased BMW. As I approached the car, I noticed something was wrong. The stance was off. It was sitting too low to the ground. I walked around to the driver's side and stopped. My stomach dropped. All 4 tires were slashed. Thick, jagged gashes tore through the rubber. They were completely flat, the rims resting on the asphalt. I crouched down, touching the ruined rubber. This was not a random act of vandalism. This was precise. This was personal. I stood up and popped the hood, hoping against hope. The hood latch clicked, and I lifted it. The engine bay was a mess. The battery cables had been severed clean through with wire cutters. The copper wires frayed and useless. Well, well, well. The voice came from the porch. I turned around. Brad and Ebony were standing there holding mugs of coffee. Brad was leaning against the railing, looking smug. Ebony was scrolling on her phone but smiling a nasty little smile. "Car trouble, Zora," Brad called out. His voice was dripping with fake sympathy. "That is a shame. That piece of junk was barely holding together as it was. Looks like it finally gave up the ghost." I stared at him. I knew he did this. I could see the grease smudge on his thumb. I could see the wire cutters sitting on the porch railing behind him. "You cut my cables," I said, my voice flat. Brad laughed. "Me? Why would I touch that death trap? I am a stockbroker, Zora. I do not do manual labor. Maybe the rats got to it. Or maybe the car just realized it was too embarrassing to be seen in this neighborhood and committed suicide." Ebony giggled. "You should check the bus schedule, Zora. The number 42 stops 3 blocks over. But you better hurry. It is a long walk and you do not want to be late for whatever imaginary job you are pretending to go to." I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost made me dizzy. I could have called the police. I could have called my security team to come pick me up in a fleet of black SUVs. I could have ended it right there. But that would ruin the plan. Mr. Sterling was expecting me at 9 o'clock sharp. If I showed up with a police escort or a security detail, word would get to my father before he stepped into that meeting. He needed to walk into that boardroom feeling invincible. He needed to believe I was nothing until the very last second. I checked my watch. 7:45. A bus would take too long. A taxi would take 20 minutes to get out to this suburb. I was trapped. The front door opened and my parents walked out. My father, Otis, was wearing his best suit. It was a charcoal gray number that was a size too tight around the waist. He had polished his shoes until they looked like plastic. My mother, Bernice, was wearing a bright floral dress and a hat that was far too large for a Tuesday morning. They looked like they were going to a coronation. "What is going on here?" my father boomed, checking his watch. "We need to leave. I cannot be late. Mr. Sterling waits for no one." "Dad." "Zora's car is dead," Brad said, pushing off the railing. "Looks like she is stranded." My father glanced at my ruined car and then at me. His lip curled. "Typical. You cannot even maintain a vehicle, Zora. How do you expect to maintain a life?" "Well, call a tow truck. We have to go." "I cannot stay here," I said, stepping forward. "I have to be downtown." My mother adjusted her hat. "For what, Zora? Another interview you are going to fail. Or are you just going to loiter in coffee shops and use their free Wi-Fi? I have important business, I said, gritting my teeth. Brad snorted. Important business. Collecting cans. Please, I said, swallowing my pride. It tasted like ash. I need a ride. You are going to the headquarters, right? That is downtown. Just drop me off near the building. My father shook his head. Absolutely not. This is a day of triumph, Zora. I am going to be named vice president. I cannot roll up to the front entrance with a freeloader in the back seat. It sends the wrong message. Image is everything. Please, Dad. He looked at me, and for a second I thought I saw a flicker of fatherly instinct. But then he looked at his watch. Fine, but we are not waiting. Get in. But you are not sitting in the front. Brad needs the legroom. He is a man of stature. We walked to the car. My father got into the driver's seat. My mother took the passenger side, but Brad stopped her. Bernice, you sit in the back with the girls, Brad said smoothly. I will ride shotgun with Otis. We need to discuss strategy for his acceptance speech. Men's talk. My mother hesitated, but she never argued with Brad. She thought his whiteness gave him some sort of divine authority. She climbed into the back seat. I went to the back door. Ebony was already sliding in, taking the window seat behind the driver. My mother was behind the passenger seat. That left the middle, the hump. But it was worse than that. Strapped into the middle seat was a massive, bulky child car seat. It was brand new, the tag still on it. What is this? I asked, pointing to the plastic monstrosity. Oh, that is for my friend's baby, Ebony said, examining her nails. I am babysitting this weekend. I just got it installed. You do not have a friend with a baby, I said. And it is Tuesday. Just get in, Zora, my father yelled from the front. We are burning daylight. There was barely 10 inches of space between the car seat and my mother. I cannot fit there, I said. Make it work, Brad called out, adjusting the side mirror and winking at himself. Or take the bus. Your choice. I looked at the car seat. I knew exactly why it was there. It was a physical manifestation of my failure in their eyes. Ebony, who had no job and no prospects, was playing at motherhood, preparing for a future they valued. I was the barren spinster being squeezed out of the family vehicle. I climbed in. I had to twist my body sideways, perching one hip on the small strip of upholstery. My knees were pressed against the back of the front seats. The hard plastic of the car seat dug into my ribs. Ebony spread her legs, claiming as much space as possible. My mother shifted away from me, pressing herself against the door as if poverty was contagious. My father started the engine. The air conditioning blasted, but it did not reach the back seat. It was stifling. Brad reached out and fiddled with the radio, turning up a talk show about the stock market. He reclined his seat back. The leather crushed against my knees. Ouch, I said involuntarily. Brad, move your seat up. He ignored me. Otis. This market is volatile, he said loudly, talking over the radio. You need to be careful with your stock options once you are VP. You will need a guy like me to manage your portfolio. I can get you into some high-risk, high-reward funds. My father nodded sagely, his eyes on the road. I was thinking the same thing, Brad. I will need to diversify. Once the salary bump hits, we are talking about a different tax bracket. I do not want Uncle Sam taking more than his fair share. I sat there crushed between my mother and a plastic throne, listening to them fantasy roleplay as millionaires. My legs were going numb. The wool of my suit was itching under the trench coat, and sweat was starting to trickle down my back. This is uncomfortable, Mom, I whispered. Can you move over a little? My mother sighed loud and long. Zora, stop complaining. You are getting a free ride in a luxury vehicle. Most people in your position would be grateful. Look at you, 35 years old and squeezing into the back of your daddy's car like a child. It is embarrassing. It is not a luxury vehicle, I thought. It is a leased Cadillac with 60,000 miles on it. Ebony leaned over and whispered in my ear. You know Brad cut your wires right. He used the tools from the garage. He said it would teach you a lesson about relying on junk. I turned to look at her. Her breath smelled like sugary cereal. She was smiling that cruel little smile she had perfected in high school. "Why didn't you stop him?" I whispered back. She laughed quietly. "Because it was funny, Zora. And because you deserve it. Coming in here acting all superior with your silence. We know you are miserable. At least be miserable on the bus." I turned my head away, staring at the back of Brad's headrest. I focused on my breathing. I focused on the cool, heavy weight of the watch on my wrist, hidden under the dirty sleeve of the coat. They thought this was a power move. They thought they were putting me in my place physically and metaphorically. They were squeezing me out, making me small, making me uncomfortable. They wanted me to feel like garbage so I would act like garbage. But they did not know that pressure creates diamonds. And they did not know that the woman squeezed into the middle seat held the deed to the building they were driving toward. My father merged onto the highway, cutting off a minivan and honking his horn. He was aggressive and erratic, driving with the arrogance of a man who thought the world owed him a lane. "I am going to tell Sterling about my vision for the warehouse," my father shouted over the radio. "Efficiency. That is the key. We are wasting too much time on breaks. I am going to cut lunch by 15 minutes. That will save the company thousands. Sterling will love that." "He is going to hate it," I said from the back. My voice was quiet but clear. "You cannot cut legally mandated breaks, Dad. The union will sue you." Brad whipped his head around. "Oh, listen to the legal expert. The woman who cannot even afford a lawyer is giving corporate advice." "Shut up, Zora. Let the big dogs talk." My father looked at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were cold. "One more word out of you, Zora, and I leave you on the side of the highway. Do not tell me how to run my department. You have never run anything in your life except your car into the ground." I bit my tongue. I tasted blood. We approached the city skyline. The glass tower of the Sterling Logistics headquarters rose above the other buildings, reflecting the morning sun. It was a beautiful building, and as of 8:00 a.m. this morning, it was my building. My father took the exit ramp. He smoothed his tie with one hand. "Showtime, people," he said. "Everyone look sharp. Brad, fix your collar. Bernice, check your lipstick." He drove toward the main entrance. The circular driveway was lined with fountains and manicured hedges. Valets were waiting in red vests. Executives were walking in carrying briefcases that cost more than my car. My father slowed down, but he did not stop. He drove past the main entrance. "Dad, where are you going?" I asked. "The entrance was back there." "I know where the entrance is," he snapped. "I am not dropping you off in front of the lobby, Zora. Look at you. You are wearing a coat that looks like you stole it from a homeless shelter. I cannot be seen with you." He turned the car down a narrow alleyway that ran along the side of the building. This was the service entrance. It was lined with dumpsters and delivery trucks. The smell of rotting garbage and diesel fumes filled the air. He stopped the car next to a loading dock. A man in a blue jumpsuit was smoking a cigarette and watching us. "Get out here," my father said, unlocking the doors. "Here?" I asked. "This is the garbage dock." "It fits," my father said. "Walk around the block if you want to go to the front, but do not come near me or your mother until after the ceremony." "I mean it, Zora. Do not embarrass me." Brad turned around and grinned. "Bye-bye, Freeloader. Try not to eat anything out of the dumpsters on your way out." I opened the door. The heat of the alley hit me. I climbed out, my legs stiff and aching. I stood on the cracked pavement next to a puddle of something green and oily. My mother did not even look at me. She was checking her reflection in her compact mirror. Ebony waved her fingers at me, mocking a goodbye. My father slammed the car into drive and peeled away, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust. I stood there alone in the alley. The hum of the building's HVAC system roared above me. I looked at the dumpsters. I looked at the service door. I reached up and unbuttoned the top button of my trench coat. Then the next. And the next. I shrugged the beige coat off my shoulders. It fell to the ground, landing in the green puddle. I did not care. I stepped out of it like a snake shedding its skin. The sun caught the midnight blue fabric of my suit. I adjusted my cuffs. I checked my watch. 8:55. I was right on time. I did not walk around the block. I walked straight to the service door. I swiped my keycard, the black executive card that had been messiered to me that morning at the hotel. The light turned green. I stepped into the cool, air-conditioned hallway of my building. I was done being the passenger. It was time to drive. The air in the back of the Cadillac was becoming unbreathable, between the stifling heat that the air conditioning could not reach and the overwhelming scent of Brad's cheap cologne. I felt like I was being slowly suffocated. My knees were jammed against the back of the leather seat where Brad was reclining like a king on his throne. Every time the car hit a pothole, the hard plastic of the empty child safety seat dug into my ribcage, reminding me of my place in this family hierarchy. I was an afterthought squeezed into the margins of their lives. Brad turned around in the front seat, shifting his shoulders so he could look back at us. He had that gleam in his eye that meant he was about to bestow his unsolicited wisdom upon us. He loved to hear himself talk, especially about money. He assumed that because I drove a Toyota and wore clothes without visible logos, I must be financially illiterate. "You know, Zora," Brad said, his voice booming in the small space. "I was looking at your situation, and I think I have some advice that could really help you. The market is in a very interesting place right now. High volatility. That is where the real players make their money." I stared straight ahead, focusing on the back of my father's head. "Is that so, Brad?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Absolutely," he said. "See, most people like you think saving pennies is the way to wealth. But you cannot save your way to the top. You have to invest. Take this morning, for example. There are rumors of a massive acquisition in the logistics sector. Phoenix Capital is making moves." My heart skipped a beat, but my face remained like stone. He was talking about my company. He was talking about the deal I had finalized at 3:00 this morning while he was sleeping. "I heard about that," I said. "What is your take on it?" Brad scoffed. "Amateur hour. Phoenix Capital is overpaying. They are buying up distressed assets at a premium. It is a classic rookie mistake. If I were advising them, I would tell them to strip the assets and liquidate. That is how you maximize shareholder value. But who knows who is running that fund? Probably some trust fund kid playing with daddy's money." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The irony was delicious. He was criticizing my strategy to my face while sitting in a car I could buy with the interest my accounts earned in a single day. "You think they should liquidate?" I asked. 100%, Brad said confidently. "The logistics industry is dead. Automation is killing it. If you had any capital, Zora, which I know you do not, I would tell you to short the whole sector. But since you are living check to check, you should probably just stick to coupons. Investing is a big boy's game." He winked at me, a slow, condescending wink that made my skin crawl. My mother chimed in from beside me. "Listen to him, Zora. Brad knows what he is talking about. He manages millions of dollars. He keeps trying to help you, but you are too stubborn to listen. If you had half of Brad's financial sense, you would not be sleeping in our guest room at your age." I looked at my mother. She was adjusting her hat, her eyes critical as she scanned my outfit. She saw a plain black suit. She did not see the Italian stitching or the quality of the fabric. She only saw what she wanted to see. "A failure." "Brad is right," my mother continued. "You need to wake up. You are 35 years old, Zora. Look at your sister. Look at Ebony." Ebony preened next to me, smoothing her skirt. She smiled that same nasty smile from the porch. "Ebony has a husband," my mother listed off. "She has a home. She has a future. She knows how to present herself. She knows how to secure a legacy. And what do you have? A car that does not run, and a bad attitude." "I have my dignity," I said quietly. "Dignity does not pay the bills," my mother snapped. "Dignity does not get you invited to the high table. You are embarrassing your father, Zora. Today is his big day, and look at you. You look like you are going to a funeral, not a celebration." Quiet. My father's voice roared from the driver's seat. He slapped the steering wheel. I need silence, he commanded. We are 10 minutes away. I need to get into the zone. I need to practice. The car fell silent. My father adjusted the rearview mirror so he could look at his own eyes. He cleared his throat. He began to mutter to himself, rehearsing the speech he planned to give to Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, sir, he said to his reflection, his voice dropping into a sycophantic purr. It is an honor. A true honor. I have served this company for 20 years. I have given my blood and sweat for this logistics empire. Your vision, sir, is what guides me. You are a titan of industry. A titan? He paused, frowning at himself. No. Titan is too much. Visionary. Yes. You are a visionary, sir. And as your vice president, I promise to execute that vision with ruthless efficiency. He glanced at Brad. How did that sound? Ruthless efficiency. Does that sound executive enough? Brad nodded vigorously. It sounds powerful, Otis. Sterling eats that stuff up. He likes alpha energy. You have to go in there and show him you are the alpha of the warehouse. Alpha energy, I repeated under my breath. My father's eyes snapped to mine in the mirror. You got something to say, Zora? I shook my head. No, Dad. It sounds exactly like you. Good, he said. Because this is it. This is the day everything changes. Once I get that title, I am going to clean house. There are too many slackers in my department. Too many people collecting paychecks they did not earn. I am going to fire the lot of them. Starting with Johnson. That guy has been eyeing my job for years. He is gone. He laughed a cruel sound. It is survival of the fittest, Zora. That is something you never learned. You let the world walk all over you. That is why you are in the back seat, and I am in the front. We entered the city limits. The skyline of Atlanta rose up around us, glittering in the morning sun. In the center of it all stood the Sterling Logistics Tower. It was a massive structure of steel and glass, 50 stories tall. It dominated the block. My father's chest swelled with pride as the building came into view. There she is, he said. The mothership. He changed lanes aggressively, cutting off a delivery truck. He navigated toward the building, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. I could see the sweat beading on his neck. For all his bluster, he was terrified. He was terrified of Mr. Sterling. He was terrified of not getting the promotion. He was a small man trying to cast a big shadow. As we approached the building, I saw the preparations. There were flags flying. There was a red carpet being rolled out at the main entrance. A crowd of employees was gathering in the plaza. My father slowed down. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the valet stand where luxury cars were already lining up. Then he looked at me in the rearview mirror. His expression soured. I cannot do it, he muttered. What is wrong, Otis? My mother asked. I cannot drop her off there, he said, pointing at the main entrance. Look at the crowd. Sterling might be out there. The board members are there. If they see me pulling up with Zora looking like a vagrant, it will ruin the image. I need to look successful, Bernice. Success breeds success. So what are you going to do? Brad asked. My father swerved the car. He pulled away from the main entrance lane and turned down a side street. Dad? I said, my pulse quickening. Where are you going? I am solving a problem, he said. He drove past the gleaming glass facade of the lobby. He drove past the fountains. He turned the car into a narrow alleyway that ran along the back of the building. This was the service entrance. It was lined with dumpsters overflowing with cardboard and packing materials. A large delivery truck was idling, spewing gray exhaust into the air. The contrast was jarring. 1 minute we were looking at luxury, the next we were surrounded by trash. My father stopped the car next to a metal door marked, "Service Delivery Only." A puddle of stagnant water sat near the curb, swirling with oil. Get out here, he said. The locks on the doors clicked open. I stared at the back of his head. You are dropping me off at the garbage dock. It is an entrance, isn't it? He snapped, not turning around. It leads to the same building. Just take the freight elevator up or walk around the block. I do not care. Just do not let anyone see you until you have cleaned yourself up in a bathroom. But Dad, I started. Out, Zora! My mother hissed, pushing my shoulder. Stop making this difficult. Your father has a reputation to uphold. Do you want to ruin his big day? You are so selfish. Ebony laughed. Maybe you will find some breakfast in that dumpster, Zora. It would save you money on lunch. Brad chuckled. Yeah, Zora. Consider it a networking opportunity. You can meet the rats. They are probably in your tax bracket. I looked at them. My family, the people who were supposed to love me. They were ashamed of me. They despised me. They were dumping me in an alley like refuse because they thought my presence would taint their shine. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the calm of the executioner. Fine, I said. I opened the door. The smell of rotting vegetables and diesel hit me instantly. I stepped out, my heels clicking on the dirty pavement. I avoided the oil puddle by an inch. I closed the door. My father did not wait. He slammed his foot on the gas and the car screeched away, leaving me standing alone next to the dumpsters. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner, heading toward the VIP entrance where they would valet the car and walk the red carpet. I stood there for a moment in the shadow of the building I now owned. I smoothed the lapel of my trench coat. They thought they had hidden me. They thought they had discarded the embarrassment. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number. It rang once. Mr. Sterling here, a voice answered, crisp and professional. Good morning, Mr. Sterling, I said. It is Zora. I am at the building. Ms. Zora. His voice changed instantly, filled with respect and a hint of nervousness. We are ready for you. The board is assembled. Shall I send security to the main entrance to escort you? No, I said, looking at the rusted metal door in front of me. I am already here. I am at the service entrance. The service entrance. There was a pause of horrified silence. Ma'am, why are you at the service entrance? Did your driver get lost? No, I said. My ride dropped me here. They thought it was where I belonged. I heard Mr. Sterling inhale sharply. I am coming down personally to get you. This is unacceptable. Do not come down, I said. Stay where you are. I will come up. But Sterling. Yes, ma'am. Make sure the main ballroom is ready, and make sure everyone is there, including the warehouse manager, Otis, and his guests. I want a front row seat for them. Understood, ma'am. I hung up. I looked at the service door. It was dented and dirty. I reached out and pulled the handle. It was heavy. I walked into the loading dock. Workers were moving crates. They stopped and looked at me, a woman in a trench coat walking with a purpose that did not match her surroundings. I walked past them. I found the freight elevator. I pressed the button. My family was walking in the front door right now, smiling and shaking hands, thinking they had won. They thought they were climbing the ladder. They did not know I had just bought the ladder, the building, and the ground it stood on. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. The ride up was slow and noisy, but it gave me time. Time to take off the coat. I unbuttoned the trench coat and let it slide off my shoulders. I left it in the corner of the elevator, a pile of beige fabric that represented a life I was leaving behind forever. Underneath the midnight blue Tom Ford suit caught the harsh light of the elevator bulb. I adjusted my cuffs. I checked my reflection in the metal wall. The freeloader was gone. The boss had arrived. The elevator dinged. It was time to go to work. The heavy metal door clicked shut behind me and the sound echoed like a gunshot in the narrow alleyway. I stood alone on the cracked concrete, surrounded by industrial dumpsters that stood like silent sentinels of filth. The air was thick with the stench of rotting vegetables and stale grease from the cafeteria kitchens above. A stray cat darted out from behind a stack of broken pallets, freezing when it saw me before scurrying away into the shadows. I looked down at my shoes. They were standing inches away from a pool of dark, oily water that reflected the gray brick wall of the service entrance. This was where my father had left me. This was where my mother had pushed me out. This was where my sister had waved goodbye with a laugh. They had deposited me here among the refuse, because they believed this was where I belonged. To them, I was just another piece of unwanted baggage, something embarrassing to be discarded through the back door, while they walked the red carpet at the front. For a moment, I just breathed. I inhaled the foul air and let it fill my lungs. It burned, but it also clarified. It burned away the last lingering shreds of guilt I had been holding on to. For months I had hesitated. When my acquisition team at Phoenix Capital first identified Sterling Logistics as a target, I had paused. I saw my father's name on the employee roster, Otis Williams, warehouse manager. I knew how much this job meant to him. I knew how much his pride was tied to this building and this company. He had spent 20 years climbing from the floor to middle management. He defined himself by his badge number. I had told my analysts to hold off. I told them to look for other targets. I did not want to buy my father's company, because I knew that if I did, I would inevitably become his boss. I worried about his ego. I worried that it would destroy him to know that the daughter he called a failure was signing his paychecks. I wanted to spare him that humiliation. I wanted to let him have his little kingdom while I built my empire elsewhere. I had tried to be the bigger person. I had tried to protect him from his own mediocrity. But then he drove past the fountains, he drove past the valet, and he dropped me here. He did not just drop me off, he hid me. He treated me like a secret shame that needed to be swept under the rug before the real guests arrived. He prioritized the perception of strangers over the dignity of his own child. I reached into the pocket of the beige trench coat and pulled out my phone. It was a secure line, encrypted and direct. I dialed Michael, my chief operating officer. He answered on the first ring. Status, he asked. His voice was tight. He knew I was at the site. I looked up at the towering glass structure above me. I could see the reflection of the clouds moving across the windows. It was a beautiful building. It deserved better leadership. Execute the clause, I said. My voice was calm, but it felt like steel. Michael hesitated. The hostile takeover clause. Zora, are you sure? We were going to wait until the quarterly earnings call next week. It would be cleaner. It would cost us less. I do not care about the cost, I said. I want it done now. I want the transfer of ownership finalized in the next 10 minutes. I want the digital ink dry before I step foot in the lobby. There was a silence on the line, then the sound of typing, keyboard keys clacking like gunfire. 10 minutes, Michael said. That is aggressive. We will have to bypass the standard notification protocols and go straight to the priority filing. It will trigger immediate alerts to the current board. Mr. Sterling is going to get a notification on his phone in about 3 minutes that he no longer owns his company. Good, I said. Make sure he sees it. And Michael. Yes, Zora. Update the personnel file for Otis Williams. Flag it for immediate executive review. Understood. Is there anything else? Yes. Have the legal team meet me in the boardroom in 15 minutes. And tell security to stand down at the main entrance. I am coming in, and I am not signing the visitor log. I hung up the phone. The screen went black. It was done. The hesitation was gone. The daughter was gone. I looked at the beige trench coat I was wearing. I hated this coat. I had bought it at a thrift store 5 years ago, during the lowest point of my life when my parents kicked me out. It smelled like mothballs and old dust. It was missing a button. It was frayed at the sleeves. For the last week I had worn it as a shield. I had worn it to play the role they expected. I had worn it to make them feel comfortable in their superiority. I had made myself small so they could feel big. I had made myself ugly so they could feel beautiful. I had made myself poor so they could feel rich. I was done playing a character in their tragedy. I unbuttoned the coat. My fingers moved methodically, working the plastic buttons through the worn holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. I shrugged my shoulders and let the coat slide down my arms. It pooled around my wrists for a second, as if trying to hold on to me one last time, and then it fell. It landed in a heap on the dirty, wet concrete. The hem soaked up the oily puddle, instantly turning a dark, nasty gray. I stared at it. It looked like a dead thing, a shed skin. I kicked it. With the toe of my shoe, I kicked the coat toward the dumpster. It didn't go far, but it was far enough. It lay there among the trash where my father had left me. I stood up straight. The morning air hit me, but this time it didn't feel stifling. It felt fresh. I was wearing a Tom Ford suit in midnight blue. It was custom made in Milan. The wool was so fine it felt like silk against my skin. The cut was aggressive, sharp shoulders and a tapered waist that commanded attention. It was a power suit in the truest sense of the word. It was armor. I looked down at my feet. My Christian Louboutin pumps gleamed in the alleyway light. The red soles were a stark contrast to the gray pavement. These shoes cost more than my sister's entire wedding budget. They were shoes made for walking over obstacles. They were shoes made for crushing doubts. I reached into my purse and pulled out a pair of sunglasses. They were oversized black frames that hid my eyes and gave nothing away. I slid them onto my face. I checked my reflection in the side mirror of a parked delivery truck. The woman staring back at me was not Zora the freeloader. She was not Zora the disappointment. She was Zora the chairman of the board. She was Zora, the majority shareholder. She was the woman who had just bought a logistics empire because her father made her sit in the middle seat. I turned away from the service door. I was not going in through the garbage dock. I was not sneaking in. I was not going to hide in the freight elevator. I started walking. I walked down the alleyway, my heels clicking a sharp rhythmic cadence on the asphalt. I walked past the overflowing dumpsters. I walked past the idling trucks. He must have tipped the valet extra to keep it there. He wanted everyone to see it. He wanted to project an image of wealth he did not possess. I saw my family. They were standing on the red carpet near the entrance. My father was holding court, gesturing wildly as he spoke to a group of middle managers who looked like they wanted to escape. He was laughing too loud, his head thrown back. He looked like a rooster crowing at sunrise. My mother was beside him, clutching her purse and smiling that tight, practiced smile she used for church and creditors. She was scanning the crowd, eyes darting around, checking who was watching her, who was admiring her hat. Ebony and Brad were off to the side. Ebony was taking a selfie with the building in the background, forcing Brad to pose. Brad looked bored, checking his watch, probably wondering when the open bar started. They looked happy. They looked relieved. They thought they had successfully disposed of the problem. I walked past the valets who looked at my lack of a car and then at my shoes and decided not to ask questions. I approached the red carpet. My family was still laughing. My father was clapping a man on the back, playing the benevolent leader. My mother was adjusting Ebony's collar, playing the doting matriarch. They were in their own little bubble of delusion. They were the stars of a movie that had just been canceled. I stepped onto the red carpet. The plush fabric felt soft under my soles. It was a path meant for VIPs. It was a path meant for the owners. I walked toward them. Brad was the first to see me. He was looking around, scanning the crowd for someone more important to talk to, when his eyes landed on me. He froze. His jaw went slack. He blinked rapidly as if his brain could not process the visual data. He nudged Ebony. Ebony looked up from her phone. Her mouth dropped open. She lowered her phone, her hand trembling slightly. My mother saw their reactions and turned around. When she saw me, her eyes bugged out. Her face went pale under her heavy makeup. She grabbed my father's arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. "Otis," she hissed. "Otis, look." My father turned around. He was mid-laugh, a smile plastered on his face. The smile faltered, then died. He stared at me. He looked at the suit. He looked at the shoes. He looked at the way I was walking, head high, shoulders back, sunglasses hiding my eyes. For a second, he did not recognize me. He saw a powerful woman. He saw authority. He saw wealth. Then the recognition hit him. "Zora," he whispered. I did not stop. I did not slow down. I walked straight toward them. My mother recovered first. The shock turned to anger. She stepped forward, blocking my path. Her face twisted into a snarl. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "We told you the back. We told you not to embarrass us. Look at you, you changed your clothes. Where did you steal that suit? You look like you are playing dress-up. Get out of here before security drags you away." I stopped. I was 2 feet away from her. I looked down at her over the rim of my sunglasses. "Move, Bernice," I said. She gasped. She had never heard me call her by her first name. I had never dared. "You ungrateful little—" She started raising her hand as if to grab me. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of the entire building behind it. "If you touch me, security will remove you, and this time they will not be polite." My father stepped in. He puffed out his chest, trying to regain his dominance. "Zora, you are making a scene," he growled. "I told you the service entrance. You disobeyed me. I am the vice president of this company. I give the orders here. You are nothing. You are a freeloader. Now turn around and walk away, or so help me God I will." "You will what, Otis?" I asked, cutting him off. "You will ground me. You will cut off my allowance. You will send me to my room." I took off my sunglasses. I looked him in the eye. "You have no power here," I said. "You are standing on my carpet. You are blocking my door. And you are wasting my time." My father turned purple. "Your carpet? Have you lost your mind? This is Sterling Logistics. This is a multi-million-dollar corporation. You own a rusted Toyota and a trench coat that smells like mothballs. You are delusional." Brad stepped forward, laughing nervously. Okay, this is getting sad. She is obviously having a breakdown. Zora, honey, you need help. Let me call you an Uber. You can go to a clinic. They have medication for this." I looked at Brad. "Brad," I said, "your credit score is 520. You are 3 months behind on your BMW lease, and your trading license is under review for misconduct. Do not speak to me about help. You are the one who needs a lawyer." Brad's mouth snapped shut. He looked terrified. "How do you— I mean, that is not—" I put my sunglasses back on. "I am done talking to you," I said. I stepped around my mother. I brushed past my father. I ignored Ebony entirely. I walked toward the revolving doors. The security guards who had been watching the scene with interest straightened up as I approached. They were trained to recognize authority. They saw the suit. They saw the walk. One of them, a large man with a stern face, stepped forward. I thought he was going to stop me. I thought my father was going to yell for him to arrest me. But the guard looked at his earpiece. He listened for a split second. His eyes widened. He looked at me with new eyes. He stepped aside and held his arm out, gesturing toward the door. "Right this way," he said. "Thank you," I said. I pushed through the revolving door. The glass spun around me. The noise of the street, the noise of my family, the noise of the past, all of it was cut off. I stepped into the lobby. It was cool and quiet. The marble floors gleamed. The high ceilings echoed with the sound of my heels. I was inside. And standing there waiting for me by the elevators was a group of people, 10 lawyers in dark suits holding briefcases, my acquisition team holding tablets. And in the center of them, looking pale and sweating profusely, was Mr. Sterling. He was holding his phone in his hand, staring at the screen, as if it had just bitten him. He looked up. He saw me. He did not see a freeloader. He did not see a disappointment. He saw the end of his reign. And he saw the beginning of mine. The grand atrium of the Sterling Logistics headquarters was designed to intimidate. The ceilings soared 50 feet high, supported by pillars of Italian marble that cost more than the neighborhood I grew up in. A massive crystal chandelier suspended in the center fractured the morning light into 1,000 rainbows across the polished floor. The air smelled of fresh lilies, expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of money. I stood near the elevators for a moment, adjusting the cuffs of my midnight blue Tom Ford suit. My legal team and the acquisition board were standing a discreet distance away, waiting for my signal. I gave them a subtle nod. They knew the drill. They would hold back until I gave the word. I wanted to see this play out. I wanted to see how the people who claimed to love me would react when I walked into their fantasy world. I turned my gaze toward the center of the room, where the champagne reception was in full swing. It was a sea of gray and navy suits punctuated by the occasional flash of a designer dress. The city's elite were here: senators, business tycoons, and the old money families of Atlanta, who had owned this town for generations. And then there was my family. They were huddled near a decorative fountain, looking like tourists who had lost their tour guide. My father, Otis, was laughing too loudly at a joke made by a junior executive who was clearly trying to excuse himself. My father clutched his champagne flute like a lifeline, his knuckles white. He was sweating. I could see the sheen on his forehead from across the room. He was terrified that someone would realize he did not belong. My mother, Bernice, was standing stiffly beside him, gripping her purse with both hands. She was smiling that tight, painful smile she wore when she was judging everyone in the room. Her eyes darted around, assessing the jewelry and shoes of the women nearby, calculating their net worth and comparing it to her own. She looked desperate. She looked like she was drowning in insecurity. Ebony and Brad were off to the side. Ebony was taking a selfie with a disinterested waiter in the background, trying to frame the shot so it looked like she was the guest of honor. Brad was scanning the room with a hungry look in his eyes, searching for someone important enough to validate his existence. He looked like a shark in a goldfish bowl, aggressive but ultimately small. They were trying so hard to blend in, but they stood out like a sore thumb. They radiated a desperate energy, a need for approval that repelled the truly powerful people in the room. They were pretenders. I took a deep breath. The cool air of the atrium filled my lungs. I felt powerful. I felt calm. I felt like the predator entering the clearing. I began to walk. My heels clicked against the marble, a sharp, rhythmic sound that cut through the murmur of conversation. I walked with a purpose that my family had never seen in me. I did not slouch. I did not look down. I walked straight toward the center of the room, straight toward them. Ebony was the first to spot me. She had just lowered her phone to check her filter when her eyes landed on me. She froze. Her jaw dropped. She blinked rapidly, as if her brain was refusing to process the image in front of her. "Zora," she mouthed. She grabbed Brad's arm, digging her fake nails into his cheap suit jacket. Brad swatted her hand away, annoyed, but then he followed her gaze. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking pasty and sick. They whispered frantically to each other. I could see the panic setting in. They did not see the owner of the building. They did not see a successful businesswoman. They saw a threat. They saw the embarrassing sister, the failure, the freeloader who had somehow escaped the alleyway and infiltrated their sanctuary. They tapped my parents. My father turned around mid-laugh. His laughter died in his throat, choking him. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest, as if she were having a heart attack. For a split second they were paralyzed. Then they moved. It was like watching a military operation. They fanned out, abandoning their drinks and their conversations, rushing toward me with a singular purpose. They had to stop me. They had to intercept the contamination before it spread. They had to keep the trash out of the palace. Ebony reached me first. She practically sprinted across the marble, her heels clacking frantically. She threw herself in front of me, blocking my path with her body. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure horror. "Are you insane?" she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "What are you doing here, Zora? We dropped you at the back. We told you to stay away." I stopped, looking down at her. "Get out of my way, Ebony. You need to leave," she said, looking around wildly to see if anyone was watching. "You are going to get arrested. Do you know where you are? This is a private event. This is for VIPs. You cannot just waltz in here because you got tired of waiting by the dumpsters." "I am not waiting by the dumpsters anymore," I said calmly. "You are going to ruin everything," she snapped. "Look at you. You broke in, didn't you? You snuck past security." Oh my God, Zora, you are psychotic. If they catch you, they will drag you out in handcuffs and everyone will see. Everyone will know I am related to a criminal. Go back to the alley. Go back where you belong. My mother arrived next, flanking me on the left. She did not yell. She went for the physical attack. Her hand shot out and pinched the soft flesh of my upper arm hard. It was a move she had used since I was a child, a way to inflict pain without leaving a mark, a way to control me without making a scene. Ow, I said, pulling my arm away. Do not touch me, you little fool, my mother whispered, her face inches from mine. Her breath smelled of anxiety and cheap mints. Are you trying to kill your father? Are you trying to give him a stroke? I am just attending the meeting, Mom, I said, rubbing my arm. The meeting, she scoffed. You are not invited to the meeting. You are not invited to the building. You are a liability, Zora. Your father is about to be promoted. He is about to reach the pinnacle of his career. And here you are trying to sabotage him out of spite. I am not sabotaging him, I said. I am here to witness it. You are here to humiliate us, she hissed. Look at you in that suit. Where did you get that? Did you steal it? Did you max out another credit card you cannot pay? You look ridiculous. You look like a child playing dress-up. You think putting on a suit makes you one of them. It does not. You reek of desperation, Zora. Now turn around and walk out that door before I call security myself. I looked at her, my own mother. She was trembling with rage. She truly believed that my presence was a stain on her existence. She truly believed that I was beneath her. I am not leaving, I said, my voice steady. Then Brad stepped in. He moved in front of me, blocking my view of the room, blocking my path to the elevators. He used his height and his bulk to intimidate me. He puffed out his chest, standing with his legs apart, taking up as much space as possible. He looked down at me, a sneer curling his lip. Listen to your mother, Zora, he said, his voice low and threatening. You are out of your depth. Way out of your depth. Move, Brad, I said. Make me, he challenged. You do not belong here, Zora. Look around. These are serious people. These are people with net worths you cannot even count to. You are a charity case. You are a leech. And leeches do not get to sip champagne with the sharks. I am not here for the champagne, I said. Then what are you here for? Brad asked, stepping closer, invading my personal space. To beg. To ask your daddy for money in front of his boss. To cry about how hard your life is. We are done carrying you, Zora. We dropped you off at the service entrance because that is the level you operate on. Service. Now be a good little girl and go find the bus stop. This place, this world, it is not for people like you. People like me, I asked, looking him dead in the eye. Failures, he said, smiling cruelly. People who cannot close the deal. People who drive Toyotas and live in guest rooms. You are a loser, Zora. And losers wait outside. My father finally joined the circle. He was red-faced and panting slightly from the exertion of rushing across the room. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and fury. Zora, he growled, I told you. I gave you a direct order. I am not your employee, Dad, I said. And I am not a child. You do not give me orders. I am the vice president of this company, he shouted, forgetting to whisper. His voice echoed slightly in the atrium, causing heads to turn. I run this place, and I am telling you to get out. You are not the vice president yet, I reminded him. I will be in 10 minutes, he said. Unless you ruin it. Unless you stand here looking like a vagrant and make me look weak. Get out, Zora. I disown you. Do you hear me? I disown you. I do not want to see your face. I do not want to hear your voice. As far as I am concerned, I have one daughter and her name is Ebony. You are nothing to me. Just a mistake I have been paying for 35 years. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. He had said it. He had said the quiet part out loud. He had confirmed what I had always known. His love was conditional, and I had failed to meet the conditions. I looked at them. My mother pinching her purse, her eyes full of hate. Ebony checking her reflection in a window, ignoring the destruction of her sister. Brad puffing his chest out like a bouncer at a cheap club. And my father a man who would throw his own flesh and blood into the garbage to secure a title. They had formed a wall, a human barricade. They were the gatekeepers of their own delusion, trying to keep reality at bay. "I am going through," I said, stepping forward. Brad put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was hard, painful. He shoved me back. I said, "No, Zora," he snarled. "You are not taking another step." The shove was forceful. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the edge of a rug. I flailed my arms for balance, barely managing to stay upright. That was a mistake, Brad. The sound of the shove, the commotion, the raised voices, it had drawn attention. The room had gone quiet. The murmur of conversation had died away. Hundreds of eyes were now watching the scene near the entrance. My father realized people were looking. He panicked. He decided to double down, to perform for the audience, to show he was in control. "Security!" he yelled, waving his arm frantically. "Security, get over here! We have a trespasser! Remove this woman immediately!" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She is harassing us," he shouted to the room at large, trying to spin the narrative. "She is mentally unstable. She is trying to extort money from me. Get her out of here." My mother grabbed my arm again, digging her nails in deep. "Come with me, you little brat," she hissed, trying to drag me toward the door. "You are going to leave if I have to drag you by your hair." Ebony was laughing nervously, trying to act like this was all a joke. "Just go, Zora. God, you are so embarrassing." Brad stepped forward again, raising his hand as if to grab me by the neck. I braced myself. I was ready to fight. I was ready to scream. But I did not have to. From the top of the grand staircase that led to the executive suites, a voice thundered through the atrium. It was a voice that commanded billion-dollar fleets and negotiated international trade deals. It was a voice that made the floor shake. "Stop!" The single word froze the room. My mother's hand dropped from my arm. Brad froze mid-step. My father's mouth snapped shut. We all looked up. Mr. Sterling was running down the stairs. The CEO of the company, a man who usually moved with the slow, deliberate grace of royalty, was sprinting. He took the steps 2 at a time, his face pale, his eyes wide with genuine terror. Behind him, a phalanx of lawyers in dark suits followed, trying to keep up. My father let out a breath of relief. He thought he was saved. He thought the cavalry had arrived to help him dispose of the intruder. "Mr. Sterling," he called out, stepping forward and smoothing his tie. "I apologize, sir. This woman is crazy. She is my estranged daughter. She followed me here to cause a scene. I was just having her removed. Do not worry, sir. I have the situation under control. Security is on the way." Mr. Sterling reached the bottom of the stairs. He was panting slightly. He ignored my father completely. He walked right past him as if he were a ghost. He walked past my mother, who had put on her best victim face. He walked past Ebony, who was trying to smile at him. He walked straight to Brad. Brad looked confused. He held out his hand, thinking he was about to be introduced. "Mr. Sterling, I am Brad. I manage Otis's." Mr. Sterling slapped Brad's hand away. It was a sharp, violent motion. "Do not touch her," he roared. Brad recoiled, clutching his hand. What Mr. Sterling stepped between me and my family. He put his back to them, facing me. He looked at me with eyes full of apology and fear. He reached out his hands, hovering near me, but not daring to make contact, as if I were made of precious, fragile glass. Then he did something that made the entire room gasp. He straightened his spine, clicked his heels together, and bowed. It was a deep, respectful bow from the waist, a bow reserved for heads of state. He stayed down for a long second. Then he straightened up and looked me in the eye. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice trembling slightly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am so incredibly sorry for this treatment. We have been waiting for you upstairs. Please tell me these people did not hurt you." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the other side of the room. My father made a sound like a dying engine. Brad's face went from red to white in an instant. My mother looked like she had been slapped. I looked at Mr. Sterling. I adjusted my jacket. I brushed an invisible speck of dust from my lapel where Brad had touched me. "I am fine, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice cool and composed. "But your entry control protocols are severely lacking. It seems you let just anyone in here." Mr. Sterling nodded vigorously, sweat dripping down his temple. "Yes, ma'am. I take full responsibility. It will be corrected immediately." He turned around slowly to face my family. His face changed from subservient to thunderous. He looked at my father, who was trembling so hard his knees were knocking together. "Otis Williams," Mr. Sterling said, his voice like a gavel striking a desk. "Did you just order security to remove the owner of this building?" My father's eyes rolled back in his head. He swayed. "Owner?" he squeaked. "Yes," Mr. Sterling said. "Owner. Meet your new boss, Otis." And then he stepped aside, leaving nothing between me and the people who had tried to throw me away. The air between Brad and me crackled with a tension that was no longer just social, but physical. He stood there like a wall of cheap wool and arrogance, his chest puffed out in a way that was meant to be intimidating but just looked ridiculous. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath and the desperation pouring off him in waves. He was a man who had never been told no in his life, not by a woman, and certainly not by a woman he considered beneath him. I looked at the space between his arm and the decorative pillar. It was a narrow gap, but I calculated that I could slip through it if I moved quickly. I was done talking. I was done negotiating with terrorists who happened to share my last name. I had a meeting to run, and they were making me late. I took a step to the left, feinting a movement toward the elevators. Brad shifted his weight clumsily to block me. It was exactly what I expected. I pivoted on my heel and lunged for the gap on his right side. For a second I thought I had made it. I was past his shoulder. I could see the open floor of the atrium ahead of me. I could see the path to my future. Then I felt his hand. It was not a gentle touch. It was not a guiding hand. It was a clamp. His thick fingers dug into the shoulder of my custom-tailored jacket, crushing the fabric and bruising the skin underneath. He grabbed me with the entitlement of a man who believes he owns the space he occupies and everyone in it. "You are not listening to me, Zora," he grunted. He did not just hold me, he shoved. It was a violent, jerky motion. He threw his weight into it, using his size advantage to hurl me backward. He wanted to knock me down. He wanted to see me sprawl on the floor so he could stand over me and feel tall. My heel caught on this edge of the plush red carpet. I felt my balance go. The world tilted sideways. I flailed my arms instinctively, reaching out for something to grab, but there was nothing but air. I stumbled back 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. My ankle twisted painfully in my stiletto. I fought to stay upright, engaging every muscle in my core. I managed to stop myself from hitting the ground, but it was close. I ended up crouching on one knee, one hand on the floor to steady myself, my head bowed. The sound of my stumble was loud. My shoes had scraped violently against the marble. The impact of my hand hitting the floor echoed in the cavernous room. A collective gasp went through the atrium. It was a sharp intake of breath from 300 people at once. The low hum of conversation that had been buzzing in the background vanished instantly. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I stayed on one knee for a moment. I looked at my hand resting on the cold white marble. My palm was stinging. I looked at the fabric of my trousers. They were dusty from the floor. Rage unlike anything I had ever felt before boiled up inside me. It was not the hot, fiery rage of a temper tantrum. It was the cold, absolute zero rage of a nuclear winter. He had touched me. He had put his hands on me. I slowly lifted my head. Brad was standing there looking down at his own hand, as if he was surprised by what it had done. But then his face twisted into a sneer. He was doubling down. He was committed to the violence now. "See what happens," he spat. "See what happens when you do not know your place. Stay down, Zora. It suits you." Ebony let out a short, high-pitched laugh that sounded like a bark. "Oh my God," she said, her voice shrill in the silence. "She is so clumsy. Look at her, she cannot even walk in heels." "Get up, Zora, you are embarrassing us," my mother hissed. "Don't look at her, just ignore her. Maybe she will crawl away." But it was my father who reacted the most violently. The noise had drawn his attention fully. He saw me on the floor. He saw the guests staring. He saw the security guards watching. He did not see a daughter who had just been assaulted. He saw a stain on his big moment. He saw a problem that refused to be solved. Otis Williams snapped. The veneer of the corporate executive fell away. The mask of the loving father dissolved. What was left was a frightened, angry man who was losing control of his narrative. He charged at me. He ran across the few feet of marble separating us, his face turning a deep mottled shade of crimson. His eyes were bulging. He looked like a madman. "You!" he roared. "You are doing this on purpose." He reached me before I could stand up. He loomed over me, his shadow blocking out the light from the chandelier. "Get up!" he screamed, spraying spit as he yelled. "Get up and get out! I told you! I told you to stay in the alley. Why can you not follow a simple order? Why do you have to ruin everything I build?" I stood up slowly, dusting off my knee. I looked him in the eye. I did not back down. "Your son-in-law just assaulted me, Dad," I said, my voice icy. "Are you going to do anything about that? Assault." My father laughed, a manic, terrified sound. "He stopped you from trespassing. He was protecting this company. He was protecting me. You are the aggressor here, Zora. You are the violence. You are attacking my reputation." He was shaking now, vibrating with adrenaline and fury. He looked around the room, seeing the eyes of the board members, the investors, the colleagues. He felt their judgment. But he misread it. He thought they were judging him for having a messy daughter. He did not realize they were judging him for being a monster. He had to fix it. He had to make me disappear. "I disown you," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I said it before and I mean it now. You are not my child. You are a parasite. You are a cancer on this family. I wish I had left you at the hospital when you were born." The words hit me like physical blows, but I did not flinch. I let them wash over me. I let everyone in the room hear them. I wanted them on the record. "Is that right, Otis?" I asked. "Yes, that is right," he yelled. "Now get out!" He raised his hand. It was a reflex, a gesture born of years of frustration and a need to dominate. He raised his heavy hand back, preparing to strike. He was going to slap me. He was going to hit his 35-year-old daughter in the lobby of a Fortune 500 company in front of 300 witnesses. I saw the hand go up. I saw the intent in his eyes. I did not move to block it. I stood my ground. I dared him to do it. I wanted him to do it. If he hit me, the lawsuit would not just be for money, it would be for his freedom. I would put him in jail before lunch. His hand reached the apex of its arc. He started to bring it down. The air in the room seemed to vanish. No one breathed. "Stop." The word did not come from the room. It came from above. It came from the heavens. It was a voice of such command, such absolute authority that it physically stopped my father's hand in midair. It was a voice that brooked no argument. It was a voice that stopped hearts. We all froze. My father's hand hovered inches from my face, trembling. Brad took a step back. My mother covered her mouth with her hands. We looked up. At the top of the grand staircase that curved down into the atrium stood Mr. Sterling, the CEO, the legend. The man my father worshipped like a god. But Mr. Sterling did not look like a god in that moment. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. His face, usually composed and stoic, was pale and slick with sweat. His eyes were wide, terrified, fixed on the scene below him. He was gripping the railing of the balcony so hard his knuckles were white. He was leaning over as if he wanted to jump down to intervene physically. Behind him, a door burst open. A phalanx of men and women in dark suits poured out. 10 of them. 20. It was an army of lawyers and executives. My acquisition team, my legal counsel. They looked like a storm front rolling in. Mr. Sterling did not wait for the stairs. He practically vaulted over the first few steps. He began to run. I had never seen a man in a $3,000 suit run like that. He was sprinting. He was taking the stairs two at a time, stumbling, recovering, keeping his momentum. His tie flew over his shoulder. His dignity was forgotten. Only one thing mattered to him: getting to me before my father's hand connected. My father turned to look at the source of the noise. He saw Mr. Sterling running toward us. A look of confusion crossed my father's face. He lowered his hand slowly. He smiled a weak, confused smile. He thought Mr. Sterling was running to help him. He thought the CEO had seen the intruder and was coming to personally assist in the eviction. "Mr. Sterling!" My father called out, his voice shaking with relief. "Thank goodness you are here, sir. I am handling it. This woman is unstable. She is attacking us." I was just about to. Mr. Sterling hit the bottom of the stairs. He did not slow down. He did not look at my father. He did not look at the crowd. He ran straight at us. His breathing was ragged, loud in the silent room. His shoes slapped against the marble. My father stepped forward, opening his arms as if to welcome his savior. "Mr. Sterling." "I apologize for the distur." Mr. Sterling's shoulder checked my father. He did not stop to talk. He slammed into Otis Williams with the force of a linebacker, knocking the wind out of him and sending him spinning away across the polished floor. My father stumbled and fell crashing into a waiter holding a tray of empty glasses. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. Mr. Sterling did not even look back. He kept coming. He reached Brad. Brad was standing there, mouth open, looking like a deer in the headlights. Mr. Sterling did not hit Brad. He stopped inches from him. He looked at Brad with a disgust so profound it was almost palpable. "Back away," Mr. Sterling roared. He sprayed spit in Brad's face. "Get away from her! Do not breathe the same air as her!" Brad scrambled back, tripping over his own feet and falling onto his backside. He scuttled backward on the floor like a crab, terrified of the fury in the older man's eyes. Mr. Sterling stood panting, his chest heaving. He was standing between me and my family. He was a human shield. He spread his arms out wide, creating a barrier. He turned his back on them. He faced me. The terror in his eyes was gone, replaced by a profound, desperate apology. He looked at my shoulder where Brad had grabbed me. He looked at my knee where the dust from the floor marred the fabric. He looked at my face, searching for bruises. He was trembling, not with anger but with fear. He knew exactly who I was. He knew that with a single word I could end his career, strip his assets, and leave him destitute. He knew that the woman his warehouse manager had just tried to slap held the keys to his entire existence. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He reached up and straightened his tie. He smoothed his jacket. He brought his heels together. The room watched in stunned silence. Mr. Sterling, the king of logistics, the man who made unions tremble, slowly bent at the waist. He bowed. It was not a nod. It was not a polite gesture. It was a deep, formal bow of subservience. He held it. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. He straightened up. He met my eyes. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice echoing in the hush. "I am so incredibly sorry. We were waiting for you in the boardroom. I had no idea these people were detaining you." He gestured vaguely behind him at my family, who were currently scattered on the floor or pressed against the walls, looking like the world had turned upside down. "Are you injured, ma'am?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Do we need a medic? Do we need the police? Just say the word." I looked at him. I looked past him at my father, who was trying to stand up amidst the broken glass. I looked at my mother, who was clutching her pearls, her eyes wide as saucers. I looked at Brad, who was still sitting on the floor, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. I brushed a piece of lint off my jacket. "I am fine, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice cool, calm, and collected. "But I think we need to have a serious conversation about your staffing choices, specifically regarding the warehouse management." Mr. Sterling nodded vigorously, sweat dripping down his nose. "Yes, ma'am. Anything you say, ma'am." He turned around slowly. He looked at my father, his face hardened into stone. Otis Williams, he said, his voice low and dangerous. My father whimpered. You just tried to strike the owner of this company. My father's legs gave out. He sat back down in the glass. The owner, he whispered. The owner. The silence that followed Mr. Sterling's declaration was heavy enough to crush bones. The word owner hung in the cavernous atrium like a guillotine blade that had just dropped, severing the reality my family had constructed from the truth that now stood before them. My father was still sitting on the floor amidst the shards of broken champagne flutes. His face had gone a color I had never seen on a human being before, a mixture of ash gray and bruised purple. He looked like a man whose brain was trying to reboot, but the operating system had been deleted. He stared up at me, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly, like a fish pulled from the water. Owner, he croaked again, his voice barely a whisper. That is impossible. She drives a Toyota. She lives in my guest room. She is a freeloader. Mr. Sterling turned on him with a ferocity that made the security guards flinch. Do not speak about the chairwoman with that disrespect, he snarled. Ms. Zora is the founder and CEO of Phoenix Capital. She acquired a 51% stake in Sterling Logistics at 8:01 this morning. She signed the wire transfer that saved this company from bankruptcy while you were busy trying to assault her in my lobby. The revelation hit the room like a physical shockwave. Phoenix Capital. The name rippled through the crowd of executives and board members standing behind the velvet ropes. They knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew the name. It was the mysterious fund that had been swallowing up logistics chains across the Southeast for the last 18 months. They had speculated for weeks about who was behind it. They had guessed it was a foreign conglomerate or a Silicon Valley tech giant. They never guessed it was the black woman in the trench coat their warehouse manager had tried to throw in the dumpster. My mother Bernice let out a strangled sound. Her hands, which had been clutching her pearls, flew to her mouth. Her eyes were darting frantically from me to Mr. Sterling to the lawyers surrounding us. She was doing the math. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was calculating the net worth of Phoenix Capital. She was realizing that the daughter she had called a failure was worth more than every person in this room combined. She took a wobbly step forward, her face contorting into a mask of terrifying fake affection. Zora, baby. She squeaked, her voice pitching up an octave. Is this true? You own the company. Oh my God, why did you not tell us? We were just worried about you. We thought you were struggling. She reached out a hand, trembling, as if to touch my sleeve to brush away the invisible lint to reclaim her property. I did not move. I did not have to. Mr. Sterling stepped in front of her again, acting as my human shield. Step back, madam, he barked. Do not approach the chairwoman. My mother recoiled as if she had been burned. But I am her mother, she wailed, playing to the crowd. This is my baby girl. We are family. Zora, tell him. Tell him we are family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had pinched my arm 5 minutes ago. The woman who had told me I reeked of desperation. I adjusted the cuff of my blazer, my movements slow and deliberate. I looked at Mr. Sterling. I have no family in this building, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I see only employees and trespassers, and currently, the employees are failing to remove the trespassers. My mother's face crumbled. It was not a pretty sight. It was the face of a woman realizing her ticket to the high life had just been canceled. Ebony, who had been standing frozen near the fountain, suddenly dropped her wineglass. It shattered on the marble, the sound loud and violent in the quiet room. Red wine splashed onto her white dress, staining it like blood. She did not even notice. She was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated envy. You, she whispered. You were lying the whole time. You let us think you were poor. You tricked us. I turned my gaze to her. I did not trick you, Ebony. I just let you see what you wanted to see. You saw a failure because you needed me to be a failure. You needed someone to look down on so you could feel tall. Brad was the only one trying to salvage the situation. He scrambled to his feet, dusting off his cheap suit pants. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to regain his slick salesman persona. He put on a smile that looked more like a rictus of terror. Okay, okay, he said, laughing nervously, his eyes darting around the room looking for an exit strategy. Wow, Phoenix Capital. That is impressive, Zora. Really impressive. I knew you had something going on. I told Otis, didn't I? I said Zora is smart. She has a plan. He took a step toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Hey, listen about the car thing earlier. That was just a joke, right? Family hazing. We were just tough love, trying to motivate you. It is all water under the bridge now, right, boss? We are good. He winked. He actually winked at me. I looked at Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said. Who is this man? Mr. Sterling looked at Brad with the same expression one would look at a cockroach on a wedding cake. I believe he is a guest of your father, ma'am, he said stiffly. Is he an employee? I asked. No, ma'am. Is he a shareholder? No, ma'am. Then why is he breathing my air? I asked. Brad's smile vanished. Zora, come on. We are family. I am your brother-in-law. You are a liability, Brad, I said, cutting him off. And as of this morning, I am in the business of cutting liabilities. I turned back to Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said, I am ready to proceed to the boardroom. But before we go, I have a directive regarding the security protocols of this building. Mr. Sterling pulled out a notepad and a gold pen, his hands shaking slightly. Yes, ma'am. Anything. It appears your staff needs to be retrained on how to identify threats, I said, looking down at my father who was still sitting in the glass staring at his shoes. They let these people walk in here and harass the owner. That is a failure of leadership. It will not happen again, ma'am, Mr. Sterling promised. I will fire the entire security team if I have to. That will not be necessary, I said. Just remove the trash from the lobby. It is cluttering up my entry. I gestured vaguely at my family. Remove them, I said. Mr. Sterling snapped his fingers. 4 large security guards materialized from the edges of the room. They did not look like the friendly doormen from earlier. They looked like bouncers. They moved toward my family. My father scrambled backward on the floor crab, walking away from them. Wait, he shouted. You cannot do this. I work here. I am the vice president. Sterling, tell them who I am. Mr. Sterling looked down at my father. You are the warehouse manager, Otis, he said coldly. And based on your conduct today, I would say your position is currently under extreme review. Now get up and go with security before I have you arrested for assault. My father gasped. He looked at me, pleading with his eyes. Zora, please. Daddy is sorry. I was just stressed. You know how I get. Baby girl, please. I turned away. I could not look at him. Not because I felt guilty, but because I felt nothing. The man who had raised me, who was supposed to be my hero, was just a small, frightened man on the floor. Security grabbed him by the arms and hauled him to his feet. He sagged between them, his legs refusing to hold his weight. My mother started screaming as a guard took her arm. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? My daughter owns this building, Zora, tell them. Zora. I did not turn back. Brad tried to run. He actually turned and tried to sprint for the revolving doors, but a guard caught him by the collar of his jacket and yanked him back. Hey, watch the suit, Brad yelled. Ebony was the only one who went quietly. She was sobbing, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, but she let the guard guide her away. She knew it was over. She knew the game was up. I watched their reflection in the glass of the elevator doors as they were dragged toward the exit. The same exit they had walked in through so proudly 20 minutes ago. The lobby was silent. The hundreds of employees and guests were watching me with a mixture of awe and terror. They had just watched a dynastic execution. I looked at Mr. Sterling. He was pale, but he was standing tall, waiting for my next command. Shall we go upstairs, ma'am? He asked, gesturing to the private elevator bank. The board is waiting. I nodded. Yes. Let us go. I walked toward the elevators. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched the woman in the midnight blue suit walk through the wreckage of her past. I stepped into the elevator. Mr. Sterling followed. The legal team crowded in behind us. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of my father being shoved through the revolving door. The elevator began to rise. My ears popped. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath I had taken in 35 years that felt completely mine. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "regarding the acquisition, we have the papers ready for your signature. But I have to ask." He hesitated, afraid to overstep. "Ask?" I said, looking at the numbers climbing on the elevator display. Floor 20, floor 30. Why, he asked. Why buy us? We were solvent. We were stable. Why Sterling Logistics? I looked at him. I saw the genuine confusion in his eyes. He thought this was business. He thought this was about profit margins and market share. "I bought it because I could," I said. "And because I wanted to see the look on Otis Williams' face when he realized he was evicted from his own ego." Mr. Sterling swallowed hard. He nodded slowly. "Understood, ma'am." The elevator dinged. Floor 50, the executive suite. The doors opened. I stepped out onto the plush carpet of the boardroom hallway. A receptionist jumped to her feet. "Good morning, Ms. Zora," she said breathlessly. I walked past her toward the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. My family was down on the street now, probably arguing with the valet, probably trying to blame each other, probably realizing that the ride home was going to be a lot longer and a lot quieter than the ride here. I did not care. I pushed open the doors to the boardroom. A long table stretched out before me, surrounded by 20 men and women in suits. They all stood up as one. I walked to the head of the table. The chair was empty. It was a massive leather chair, the throne of the kingdom. I sat down. I looked at the faces around the table. They were waiting. I placed my hands on the polished wood. "Let's get to work," I said. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to speak. I was the one giving it. The double doors of the grand ballroom swung open. The hum of 500 voices died instantly. I walked in. Mr. Sterling walked a step behind me, his head bowed slightly. The acquisition team flanked us. The room was a theater of corporate ambition, rows of chairs filled with anxious employees, a raised stage with a podium and a massive screen displaying the Sterling Logistics logo. And there in the corner, cordoned off by 3 unsmiling security guards, was my family. They had been detained. They were not allowed to leave. Not yet. I wanted them to see this. I wanted them to see the view from the bottom while I stood at the top. Mr. Sterling hurried to the podium. He tapped the microphone. The sound echoed like a thunderclap. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice shaking just a little. "Thank you for gathering on such short notice. As you know, this company values adaptability. Today we are adapting to a new era." He paused. He looked at me. He looked at the woman he had bowed to in the lobby. "It is my distinct honor," he continued, "to introduce the new majority shareholder and chairwoman of the board, the founder of Phoenix Capital, Ms. Zora Williams." He stepped aside. He gestured to the microphone. I walked up the steps to the stage. The silence in the room was heavy. It was the silence of people holding their breath, waiting to see if they still had jobs, waiting to see who held their fate in her hands. I stood behind the podium. I gripped the sides of it. The wood was cool and smooth. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the fear. I saw the curiosity. And then I looked at the corner. My father Otis was slumped in a chair. His tie loosened his face, a mask of defeat. My mother was weeping silently into a tissue, ruining her expensive makeup. Ebony was staring at the floor, her arms crossed defensively, and Brad was looking around with wide, panicked eyes, searching for an angle, searching for a way out. I leaned into the microphone. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and cold. For the past week, I have been conducting a silent audit of this company. I have been watching. I have been listening. And I have been evaluating the culture of Sterling Logistics. I paused, letting the words sink in. I have found a disturbing trend. I continued. A trend of entitlement. A trend of people who believe that their title gives them value rather than their output. A trend of people who take more than they give. I looked directly at my father. He lifted his head. Our eyes locked. Last night I said, keeping eye contact with him, I was called a word, a very specific word. I was called a freeloader. My father flinched. He shrank back in his chair as if I had thrown a stone at him. I let the word hang in the air. Freeloader. It is an interesting word, I said, addressing the room but speaking only to him. A freeloader is someone who utilizes resources without contributing. Someone who eats the food but does not help cook. Someone who uses the water but does not pay the bill. Someone who rides in the car but complains about the seat. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. They did not know the context, but they felt the weight of the accusation. In business, we call these people liabilities, I said. We call them dead weight. And at Sterling Logistics, we have a surplus of dead weight. We have managers who spend their mornings rehearsing speeches in the mirror instead of optimizing workflow. We have executives who are more concerned with the image of success than the mechanics of it. I saw my father's face crumble. He knew. He knew I was using his own vanity against him. He knew I had heard him in the car muttering to himself about his alpha energy. You cannot build an empire on ego, I said, my voice rising slightly. You cannot build a legacy on lies. And you certainly cannot build a future if you are too busy looking down on the people you think are beneath you. I took a step back from the podium and picked up the glass of water sitting there. I took a sip. Real value, I continued, is not in the suit you wear. It is not in the car you lease. It is not in the title on your door. Real value is in the work. It is in the integrity. It is in the ability to recognize worth in others, even when they are wearing a trench coat from a thrift store. My mother let out a loud sob. She tried to stifle it, but it escaped a sound of pure misery. She realized now that the trench coat had been a test, and she had failed it spectacularly. I am here to trim the fat, I said. I am here to remove the freeloaders. Starting today, every position in this company is under review. If you are here to work, you have a future. If you are here to pretend, you have a future. I looked at the corner again. And let me be clear, I said. Nepotism is dead. Favoritism is dead. The old boys' club is closed. I saw Brad straighten up. He adjusted his jacket. He ran a hand through his hair. I could see the gears turning in his desperate little mind. He heard the word nepotism, and he thought he saw a loophole. He thought he could spin this. He thought he could use his connection to me to save himself. He stood up. The security guard moved to stop him, but Brad held up his hands in a non-threatening gesture. Zora, he called out. His voice was loud, shaky, and full of forced familiarity. The room gasped. No one interrupted the chairwoman. Zora, Sis, Brad said, walking toward the stage with a smile that looked like a grimace. That was a great speech. Really powerful stuff. I know exactly what you mean. We were just joking around earlier, right? You know how family gets. Toughens you up. He laughed, a nervous braying sound. I get it now. It was all a test. And wow, did you pass. I am so proud of you, Zora. I really am. And I think I can really help you here. With my financial background and your vision, we could be a power team. I mean, we are practically siblings. He reached the edge of the stage. He put his hand on the wood as if to climb up. I looked at him. I looked at Mr. Sterling, who was standing next to me, looking like he wanted to vomit. I leaned into the microphone. Mr. Sterling, I said. Yes, ma'am, Mr. Sterling replied, snapping to attention. Who is this man, I asked. The room went deadly silent. Brad's smile froze. What do you mean, Zora? He said, his voice faltering. It is me. Brad. Your brother-in-law. I looked at Mr. Sterling, ignoring Brad completely. Does this man work here? I asked. No, ma'am, Mr. Sterling said. Is he a client? I asked. No, ma'am. Is he a consultant, an investor, or a vendor? I asked. No, ma'am. He has no affiliation with this company whatsoever. I turned my gaze back to Brad. He looked like he was shrinking, melting under the heat of the spotlight. Then why is he in the VIP section? I asked, my voice cutting like a razor. Why is a stranger standing at the foot of my stage, interrupting my keynote address? Where is security? Brad's eyes bulged. Zora. Stop playing. You know me. We ate dinner together last night. I drove you here. I do not know any freeloaders, I said, and I certainly do not know any men who assault women in lobbies. I pointed at the security guards. Remove him, I said, and check his pockets. He looks like the type to steal the silverware. 2 guards grabbed Brad. They did not be gentle. One grabbed his left arm, the other grabbed his right. They hauled him backward. Hey, get off me, Brad screamed, kicking his legs. Zora, tell them we are family. Otis, do something. My father did not move. He sat in his chair, staring at the floor, a broken man. He knew better than to speak. He knew that if he opened his mouth, he would be next. You cannot do this to me, Brad yelled as they dragged him toward the exit. I am a stockbroker. I drive a BMW. You lease a BMW, I corrected him into the microphone. And according to my credit report on you, you have missed the last 3 payments. Goodbye, Brad. The doors swung open and they threw him out. His shouts faded into the hallway. I looked back at the crowd. They were staring at me with wide eyes. They were terrified, but they were also impressed. They saw a leader who did not tolerate nonsense. They saw a woman who cut the cord. I looked at my mother and sister. They were huddled together, trembling. They knew they were next. They knew there was no mercy coming. I turned back to the audience. As I was saying, I continued as if nothing had happened. We are entering a new era. An era of accountability. I looked at my father one last time. Otis Williams, I said. My father looked up. His eyes were red. He looked old. Please, he mouthed. You mentioned earlier that you had a vision for the warehouse, I said. You wanted to cut lunch breaks by 15 minutes to save money. My father nodded slowly, hope flickering in his eyes. He thought I was validating him. He thought I was going to praise his idea. That is illegal, I said, and it is inhumane. It is the kind of small-minded thinking that keeps a company stagnant. The hope in his eyes died. However, I continued. I do believe in efficiency, and I believe that the warehouse needs new leadership. Leadership that understands the value of the workers. I pointed to a man sitting in the 3rd row. He was wearing a blue work shirt. He looked surprised. Mr. Johnson, I said, reading the name from the dossier I had memorized. You have been a shift supervisor for 10 years. My reports indicate you consistently advocate for worker safety and morale, even when it contradicts management. Mr. Johnson stood up slowly. Yes, ma'am. You are the new vice president of logistics, I said. The room erupted. People gasped. Mr. Johnson looked like he had been struck by lightning. My father let out a sound that was half sob, half wheeze. That was his job. That was the title he had promised himself. That was the promotion he had bought the suit for. And Otis, I said, looking down at him, since you value hard work so much, and since you hate freeloaders, I am not going to fire you. My father looked up. He looked pathetic. Thank you, Zora, he whispered. Thank you. You will report to Mr. Johnson, I said. You will return to your previous position as a floor associate. You will drive a forklift. You will load trucks, and you will work the night shift. My father's jaw dropped. A floor associate. That was an entry-level job. That was the job he had started with 20 years ago. It was a demotion so severe it was a death sentence for his ego. But I am 60 years old, he wailed. I cannot work the floor, my back. You should have thought about your back when you were trying to cut lunch breaks, I said. Or when you were driving past the front door to drop your daughter in the garbage. I looked at Mr. Sterling. See to it that he gets his uniform, I said. And make sure it fits. We do not want him looking sloppy. Image is everything. Mr. Sterling nodded. Yes, ma'am. I looked at my mother and Ebony. And as for these two, I said, they do not work here. They are not clients. They are trespassing. I waved my hand dismissively. Escort them out, and ban them from the premises. If they step foot on this property again, arrest them. Security moved in. My mother started to scream. Ebony tried to run, but she tripped in her heels and fell. It was a chaotic, messy end to their delusions of grandeur. I did not watch them leave. I turned my back on them. I looked at my new employees. I looked at my new empire. That concludes the meeting, I said. Thank you for your time. I walked off the stage. I walked straight into the boardroom that adjoined the stage. I sat at the head of the table. I was alone. The silence was beautiful. I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. I dialed the number for the towing company. Hello, I said. Yes, I have a Toyota Camry parked on Elm Street. It has slashed tires and cut cables. Please tow it to the scrapyard. I will not be needing it anymore. I hung up. I leaned back in the leather chair. I closed my eyes. I was not a freeloader. I was the bill collector, and I had just collected every single cent they owed me. I hung up the phone with the towing company and stood up from the leather chair. The silence in the boardroom was heavy, but outside the double doors I could hear a commotion. It sounded like a screeching cat fighting a lawnmower. It was my family. They were not going quietly. I walked out of the boardroom and moved to the balcony that overlooked the main lobby. Below me, the security guards were struggling to corral the chaotic mess that was the Williams clan. They were making a scene, and a crowd of employees had gathered to watch the spectacle. It was pathetic, but it was also an opportunity. I realized I had left a few loose ends untied. There were still lies floating in the air, and I wanted to pop every single one of them before they left my building. I walked down the grand staircase slowly, my eyes fixed on the scene below. Ebony was clinging to a marble pillar, screaming at a security guard who was trying to detach her. Her face was a mask of smeared mascara and rage. "Do not touch me," she shrieked. "Do not touch my bag. This is a Birkin. It is worth more than your entire life. If you scratch it, I will sue you. I will sue this whole company." She held the orange handbag against her chest like a shield. She looked around the lobby, seeking validation, seeking anyone who would recognize her status. I stopped on the bottom step. "It is not a Birkin, Ebony," I said, my voice cutting through her screams. She whipped her head around to look at me. "Yes, it is," she spat. "It is a limited edition. Brad bought it for me. It cost $20,000. You are just jealous, Zora. You are jealous because you carry a canvas tote and I drip in luxury." I beckoned to a man standing near the reception desk. He was a tall, slender man in an impeccable gray suit with a silk scarf around his neck. His name was Henri, and he was one of the fashion consultants I had hired to rebrand the corporate image. He had an eye for detail that was sharper than a scalpel. Henri Richter said, "Could you please take a look at my sister's handbag? She seems to be under the impression it is authentic Hermès." Henri stepped forward, his face pinched in an expression of distaste. He did not even need to touch it. He just leaned in and squinted. "Oh dear," he said, his voice dripping with French disdain. What Ebony snapped, clutching the bag tighter. "The stitching," Henri said, pointing a manicured finger. "It is uneven. And the hardware, that gold plating, is already chipping. See there on the clasp. Hermès does not chip, darling. And the smell," he wrinkled his nose. "That is not leather. That is pleather. It smells like gasoline and plastic." The crowd of employees erupted in laughter. It was a low ripple of amusement that stung more than a slap. Ebony looked down at her bag. She scratched at the gold clasp with her fingernail. A flake of gold paint came off, revealing cheap gray metal underneath. Her face went slack. She looked at Brad, who was being held by two guards near the door. You said it was real, she whispered. You said you got it from a connection in Paris. Brad would not meet her eyes. He was sweating profusely, looking at the floor. It is a Canal Street knockoff ebony, I said, walking closer to her. It cost maybe $50. Just like your shoes. Just like your jewelry. Just like your life. It is all fake. You have been walking around this city acting like royalty, but you are wearing a costume. Ebony dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a hollow plastic thud. She looked at it as if it were a dead rat. The illusion she had built her entire personality around shattered in an instant. She shrank into herself, crossing her arms over her chest, trying to hide, trying to disappear. I turned my attention to Brad. He was trying to make himself small, trying to blend into the drywall, but there was nowhere to hide. And speaking of fakes, I said, walking toward him, let us talk about you, Brad. The stockbroker, the financial wizard, the man who was going to manage my father's portfolio. Brad looked up, his eyes pleading. Zora, come on, do not do this, not here. Why not here, I asked. You were very happy to give me financial advice in the car. You were very loud about my poverty. I think it is only fair we examine your wealth. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket. It was the background check my security team had run while I was in the elevator. Bradley Thomas, I read aloud. Unemployed for the last 8 months, fired from your last position as a junior analyst for unauthorized trading. The crowd gasped. My father Otis, who was leaning against the wall looking like a deflated balloon, lifted his head. Fired, he whispered. But he goes to work every day. He goes to the coffee shop, Otis, I said. He sits there on the free Wi-Fi and pretends to work, just like he accused me of doing. I continued reading. Credit score 480. Outstanding debt on 3 credit cards totaling $45,000. And the BMW. I looked at Brad. It is not leased, is it, Brad? It is a rental, a weekly rental. And you are 2 weeks overdue. The rental company has reported it stolen. Brad closed his eyes. The truth was out. The Wolf of Wall Street was just a sheep in wolf's clothing, and the wolf was broke. You are a fraud, Brad, I said. You have been living off my sister, using her credit to fund your fake life. You are the definition of a freeloader. Ebony let out a scream of pure rage. She launched herself at Brad, hammering her fists against his chest. You liar, she screamed. You broke loser. You told me you were rich. You told me we were a power couple. Security pulled her off him. Brad hung his head, defeated. The arrogance was gone, leaving behind a small, pathetic man who had been caught. Get them out, I said to the guards. They dragged Brad and Ebony toward the revolving doors. Their shouts and accusations faded into the street noise, leaving a stunned silence in the lobby. Only my parents remained. My mother was sobbing quietly, leaning against the reception desk. My father was standing alone, looking at his hands. I walked over to him. Otis, I said. He flinched. He looked at me with eyes that were red and watery. He looked old, suddenly very old. I am sorry, Zora, he mumbled. I messed up. I know I messed up. Just let me go. I will resign. I will walk away. I cannot work in the warehouse. I cannot report to Johnson. It is too humiliating. I will take my pension and go. I shook my head slowly. It is not that simple, Dad. What do you mean? He asked, a flicker of fear returning to his eyes. I signaled to Mr. Sterling, who was standing nearby holding a tablet. He walked over and handed it to me. I tapped the screen and held it up for my father to see. It was his employment contract. You signed a new contract 5 years ago, Dad, I said. Do you remember? When you got that seniority bonus? He nodded slowly. Yes. What about it? I scrolled to the bottom. Clause 14b, early termination or resignation prior to retirement age results in a forfeiture of all non-vested pension benefits. My father blinked. What does that mean? It means, I said, my voice devoid of sympathy, that if you quit today you lose your pension. You lose the retirement fund you have been building for 20 years. You walk away with nothing. Zero. His knees buckled. He grabbed the reception desk to hold himself up. But, but I am 60, he stammered. I cannot start over. I need that money. Then you cannot quit, I said. You have to work. You have to serve out your term until you are 65. 5 more years, Otis. 5 years of reporting to Mr. Johnson. I continued relentlessly. 5 years of driving a forklift. 5 years of the night shift. 5 years of being the lowest man on the totem pole in a building you thought you ran. No, he whispered. No, Zora, please. You cannot make me do that. It will kill me. Everyone knows me. Everyone saw what happened today. They will laugh at me. Let them laugh, I said. You wanted to be the alpha. Now you are going to learn what it feels like to be part of the pack. You are going to learn humility, Otis. Every single night when you punch that clock, you are going to remember the daughter you called a disappointment. You are going to remember that she is the one signing your checks, and she is the one keeping a roof over your head. Because if you quit, I said, leaning in close, if you walk out that door, I will accept your resignation immediately, and you will be destitute. Is your pride worth your pension, Dad? He looked at me. He looked at the hard, cold woman standing in front of him. He searched for the little girl who used to look up to him, but she was gone. He had killed her. He looked down at the floor. A single tear rolled down his cheek. I will stay, he whispered. Good, I said. Shift starts at 6:00 p.m. Do not be late, and tuck your shirt in. You represent my company now. I turned to my mother. She was staring at me with a look of absolute horror. She realized that her husband was trapped. She realized the money train had stopped. She realized that the luxury life she craved was gone, replaced by a husband working the night shift and a daughter who despised her. Zora, she started, her voice trembling. I held up a hand. I do not want to hear it, Bernice. I do not want your apologies. I do not want your excuses. You picked your side. You picked the winning team, you thought. Well, you bet wrong. I gestured to the door. Go home, I said. Wait for your husband. He has a long night ahead of him. And so do you. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the elevators. I did not look back to see them leave. I did not need to. I could feel their defeat. It radiated off them like heat. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse suite. The doors closed, shutting out the sight of my father weeping in the lobby. I was alone. I leaned my head back against the metal wall and let out a long, slow breath. It was done. The structure of their lives had been dismantled brick by brick. The fake bag, the fake job, the fake pride, all of it was dust. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from my bank. The wire transfer for the acquisition had cleared. The funds were settled. I was the owner. I was the boss. And I was finally free. But there was one last thing to do. One final tie to cut. I arrived at the top floor. I walked into my new office. It was a massive corner suite with a view of the entire city. I walked to the window and looked down. From this height, the people on the street looked like ants. I wondered if my family was down there somewhere, scrambling to find a ride home, fighting over who was to blame. I sat down at the desk. It was empty except for a single phone. I picked up the receiver and dialed a number. It was the number for the real estate agent who managed the lease on my parents' house. I had bought the mortgage note 3 months ago through a shell company as part of my long-term strategy. I had held on to it, waiting. Hello, a voice answered. This is Zora Williams, I said. I am the holder of the note for the property on Oak Creek Drive. Yes, Ms. Williams. Miss, how can I help you? I want to initiate a rent review, I said. The current tenants are paying below market value. I want to increase the rent by 20%, effective immediately. There was a pause. 20%. That is a steep hike, Ms. Williams. They might not be able to afford it. I know, I said, twirling the phone cord around my finger. Send the notice today. I hung up. It was petty. It was cruel. It was exactly what they would have done to me. I swiveled the chair around to face the window. I watched the sun climbing higher in the sky. The dismantling was complete. Now it was time to build. I placed the receiver back on the cradle, and the click sounded like the final period at the end of a long and painful sentence. The rent hike was petty, yes, but after years of being squeezed into the margins of their lives, I felt I had earned a moment of pettiness. I stood up and walked away from the desk. I did not look back at the office. I did not look back at the empty chair. It was mine now. It would be there tomorrow. I walked to the private elevator. The doors slid open with a whisper. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The descent was smooth. Gravity pulled at me, but I felt weightless. I checked my reflection in the polished metal doors. The woman staring back at me was not the same woman who had entered the building through the garbage dock 2 hours ago. That woman had been holding her breath. This woman was finally exhaling. When the doors opened in the lobby, the atmosphere had changed completely. The party was over. The guests had dispersed, leaving behind half-empty glasses and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. The cleaning crews were already moving in, sweeping away the debris of the morning. Mr. Sterling was waiting for me near the main entrance. He was standing next to a man in a chauffeur uniform who was holding a cap in his hands. "Your car is ready, ma'am," Mr. Sterling said. He gestured to the glass doors. "We took the liberty of arranging the company Maybach for your transport. Your Toyota has been taken care of as requested." "Thank you, Sterling," I said. "I will see you tomorrow at 9. We have a lot of work to do." "Yes, ma'am. Have a good evening." I walked toward the revolving doors. The security guard, the same one who had let me in earlier, rushed to hold the door open for me. I stepped out into the humid Atlanta air. It was warm, but the humidity felt different now. It felt like opportunity. A sleek black Maybach was idling at the curb. It was a massive vehicle, a land yacht designed for comfort and power. It was parked exactly where my father had wanted to park his Cadillac. It occupied the space he had coveted. The driver opened the rear door for me. I slid onto the cream-colored leather seats. It smelled of new leather and lavender. There was a bottle of chilled water waiting in the cup holder. I picked it up and held the cool glass against my wrist. "Drive," I said. The driver nodded and began to pull away from the curb, but we did not get far. As the car rolled forward, moving slowly through the circular driveway, I saw a commotion on the sidewalk. A group of people were standing near the fountain arguing with a parking attendant. They looked disheveled. They looked desperate. It was them. My father had tucked his shirt in, but his suit jacket was rumpled, and he was holding his tie in his hand. My mother was sitting on the edge of the fountain, rubbing her feet, her heels kicked off onto the pavement. Ebony was pacing back and forth, furiously texting someone, probably trying to find a ride since Brad had been thrown out separately. They looked like refugees from a disaster they had created. My mother looked up as the black car glided past. The tinted windows were dark, but she saw the silhouette in the back seat. She saw the profile. She knew. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring her shoes. She ran toward the car. She waved her arms frantically. "Zora," she screamed. "Zora, stop!" She threw herself against the side of the car. Her palm slapped against the glass. The driver braked sharply, surprised by the sudden assault. "Ma'am, do you want me to keep going?" the driver asked, eyeing the woman banging on his window. "Stop for a moment," I said. I looked at her through the tinted glass. She looked distorted, her face pressed close, her makeup running, her eyes wide and pleading. She was mouthing my name over and over again. I pressed the button on the armrest. The window slid down with a quiet hum. It stopped when it was open just 3 inches. Enough to hear, enough to speak, not enough to touch. "Zora," my mother gasped, breathless from running. "Oh, thank God. Zora, please, open the door. Let us in. We have no ride. Otis cannot drive, he is too shaken up. And Ebony's phone is dead. Please, baby. We are family." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had told me to take the bus. I looked at the woman who had watched her husband drive away from the service entrance without a backward glance. She reached her fingers toward the gap in the window, trying to bridge the distance. "We are sorry," she sobbed. "We are so sorry. We did not know. If we had known you were successful, we would never have treated you that way. We were just trying to push you. We love you, Zora. We are your family. You cannot leave us here on the sidewalk. What will people think?" I took a sip of the water. It was crisp and cold. "Family?" I asked, my voice flat. "Yes, family," she insisted, nodding frantically. "Your father and your sister. We are your blood." I shook my head slowly. "You are mistaken, Bernice," I said. "What do you mean?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. I leaned closer to the gap in the window so she could see my eyes. I wanted her to see that there was no anger left in them, only ice. "Family," I said, "does not drop their daughter off at a garbage dock because her coat is old. Family does not squeeze their sister into the middle seat to make room for a plastic chair. Family does not call their child a freeloader in front of strangers." "But we apologized," she wailed. "No," I said. "You got caught. That is different." I looked past her at my father, who was watching from the fountain, too ashamed to come closer. I looked at Ebony, who was glaring at the car with jealousy still burning in her eyes. "The family you are looking for died at the service entrance this morning," I said. "I left them back there with my old coat. The woman in this car does not have a family." My mother recoiled as if I had spit on her. "Zora, do not say that. I am not your daughter anymore," I said. "I am your landlord, and I am your husband's employer. That is the only relationship we have now." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. "And Bernice," I added, "good luck with Brad's debt. I hear the collectors are very persistent. And with the rent hike coming next month, you might want to start looking for a smaller place. Maybe something near the bus line." Her eyes went wide. "Rent hike." I pressed the button. The window began to slide up. "Zora, no, wait!" she screamed, banging on the glass again. "Zora, please." The window sealed shut, cutting off her voice. The silence of the car returned instantly. I could see her mouth moving. I could see her screaming, but I could not hear her. She was just a silent movie character, flailing in the wind. "Drive," I said to the chauffeur. The car pulled away smoothly. I did not look back. I put my sunglasses on. I leaned back into the soft leather seat. The city sped by outside the window, a blur of steel and glass. I took another sip of water. It tasted like victory. For 35 years, I had been chasing something that did not exist. I had been chasing their approval. I had been chasing their love. I had been trying to fill a bucket that had a hole in the bottom. I had thought that if I was successful enough, if I was rich enough, if I was good enough, they would finally see me. But they had seen me. They saw me at the dinner table. They saw me in the car. They saw me in the alley. They saw exactly who I was, and they rejected it because it did not serve them. They did not want a daughter. They wanted a prop. They wanted a punching bag. They wanted someone to make them feel superior. And when I took that away from them, they crumbled. I realized then that I had not lost a family. I had lost an anchor. I had cut the rope that was dragging me down to the bottom of the ocean. I looked at my phone. I had a meeting with the acquisitions team at 2. I had a dinner with the investors at 7. I had a life to build, a real life, one built on respect, one built on competence, one built on truth. I thought about the people in that boardroom, the lawyers, the analysts. Mr. Sterling, they did not love me, they did not have my blood, but they respected me. They listened to me. They valued me. That was enough. I closed my eyes and let the movement of the car rock me. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The knot in my stomach that had been there since I was a child was gone. The voice in my head that told me I was a failure was silent. I was Zora Williams. I was the owner. I was the boss. And for the first time in my life, I was free. They called me a freeloader because I refused to pay for their lobster. They called me a disappointment because I refused to play their game. They thought they could break me, But you cannot break someone who has already built herself back up from nothing. You cannot shame someone who knows her own worth. They learned a hard lesson today. They learned that the person you step on to get to the top might just be the person waiting for you when you get there. I smiled. It was a small, private smile. Never underestimate the quiet one in the room. Never underestimate the one you think is weak. Because while you are busy talking about your power, she is busy buying the building you are standing in. I am Zora, and this is my company now. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to support you, if you have ever been treated like an option when you should have been a priority, if you have ever had to build your own table because they would not give you a seat at theirs, then you know exactly how this feels. It feels like justice. Hit that like button if you enjoyed watching the tables turn. Subscribe if you want to see more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve. And remember, success is the best revenge, but owning the building is a close second. This story serves as a powerful reminder that your self-worth is never defined by your family's inability to see it. Zora endured years of disrespect, being labeled a failure while secretly building an empire. She teaches us that we do not need to perform for an audience committed to misunderstanding us. True power isn't about flashing wealth or demanding attention. It is about knowing who you are when the room goes quiet. Sometimes you have to stop trying to get a seat at a table where you aren't respected and simply buy the building instead. Freedom is the ultimate success. If you believe in building in silence and letting your success make the noise, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served.